every time I think I've just changed my strings, I actually figure out that it's probably been a month or 2 months. And I'm in the habit of trying to change my strings a bit more frequently because they sound better and they stay better in tune that way, and especially when I'm trying to play a little bit more as I'm studying a couple of semesters at music school, so I'm just playing a lot more. And yeah, it's been 2 months. I can't even believe it's been 2 months since I changed them. I put D'Addario EXL 110s on there, and as I discovered when I put those on there, they're really good strings, and I was surprised why I was using anything else. So it's time to change them, and despite what I said last time, I'm actually going to try something else. The reason I'm going to try something else is because I had never heard of Bullet-end strings before. I had never heard of these things, and I thought this is some sort of new innovation or new gimmick. But actually, these have been around for a very long time, shows how much I know. The difference between these and the strings I've been using and the strings that you typically come across, the usual string has that little metal ring on the end, and the string is kind of wound around that or looped around that. When you have a Stratocaster with a tremolo bar, when you push the tremolo bar in, all the strings are loosened, so they're held tight inside the end of that tremolo bar, the kind of spring-loaded guy on the end there, right? They're held tight in there, and when you push the tremolo bar in, they all get loose, and then you release the tremolo bar and they all tighten up again. But because it's a circular loop, it has a little bit of play, so it can it doesn't go back exactly the same way. It doesn't come back consistently, so it might be, the loop might be facing this way, then it might be facing that way. So because of the unevenness of how it returns to its previous position, that can lead to a little bit of detuning or difference in how the tuning works. Now personally, I think if you don't have locking nuts or locking head on your tuning heads, you're probably going to get some detuning effect anyway. But the idea of the Bullet-Ends is because no matter which way they settle back in, they're consistently evenly shaped so that they will always form a snug fit when they go back in. Then the argument is these won't go out of tune. So I was just curious about that, and I figured, well, let me try that out. I'm also just curious to hear what they sound like overall. They are Fender strings, so they're made by the same company that makes the guitar, and that sometimes means something, and sometimes not so much. But I've never tried Bullet-Ends, so I'm going to try these pure nickel Bullet-Ends, and these are 10s. So I just tuned this guitar up, and then using the tremolo bar, it already sounds out of tune again. So you see what I mean? If you use a tremolo bar a lot, you have to be careful that your guitar is going a little bit out of tune. And I think if the Bullet-Ends can avoid some of that, that's an interesting, attractive prospect, because there are times when I really wail on that tremolo bar, and to have a bit more comfort around knocking out of tune without buying a guitar with locking heads would be kind of cool. So that's kind of back in tune. Seems pretty okay. So yeah, you use the tremolo bar, it just goes well out of tune. I do think there is something about how the strings are wound on the head, and if there's no locking there, a little bit of play can come into effect there, and the things can go out of tune. So that might be part of it. But I'm curious, if I put these bullets in there and I tune it up and I use a tremolo bar, how's that going to feel? Now, because there are kind of new strings going on there, I sort of feel like I want to play them in for a day or two. At least, so that they settle, because new strings definitely tend to go out of tune a bit more frequently anyway. So let's put these on. I'll play them heavily, I'll let them settle in, and then we'll repeat that experiment. Just wail on the tremolo bar and see, does it go crazy out of tune? If it doesn't, then interesting. The second test will be, well, how do they sound? Do they sound as good as the D'Addarios? Because if they stay in tune but just don't sound as good, well, that's a trade-off. So I'm curious, let's give it a shot. they sound pretty good. I'm gonna take some of those effects off there and just hear them a bit cleaner. They're still a little bit new, so they're going out of tune marginally here and there. They sound good. You know, they don't sound bad. They really don't sound bad, but you know, just thinking about the D'Adderios I had on there before, I just threw those on there last time, a couple of months ago, and I just felt really good playing them. They just sounded great. It just felt right. These don't sound bad. They're not nearly as bad as, or as dull, or overly zingy, or just unimpressive as some of the other strings I've tried. But I still feel like the D'Adderio is just a better set for this, which is weird because these are Fenders. But the real reason I wanted to try these, though, I mean, yeah, they sound okay. They don't sound too bad at all. Putting a little extra bass on them, taking the treble out, just turning the tone down, they sound a little warmer, but they're not massively exciting. But the real reason I wanted to try these was I was curious about the Bullet-End. So the Bullet-End, that little piece of metal, no matter which way, when the strings get loosened in the tremolo bar, no matter which way they kind of fall out of place and then lock back in, because it is a consistent shape, there's no way for it to go back in differently and sit differently than it was sitting originally. It's always going to kind of go back in the same way and lock in the same way, as opposed to that metal loop which can kind of turn different ways and perhaps form a minimally different length of string when it settles back in. So the argument is this will lead to less detuning when you use the tremolo bar. So let's just have a look at that. Well, that doesn't seem to work as far as I'm concerned. Now, maybe when the strings will settle in, because I changed these on Friday, it's now Sunday, and I've played this a little bit, so perhaps when the strings settle in more on the nut and they're just tighter in there and they're settled in, then they're not going to go out of tune as much, and maybe you ultimately need a locking head on there. Then the Bullet-End is gonna serve its purpose and allow you to stay in tune no matter how crazily you're wailing on that whammy bar, on the vibrato bar. But you know, this isn't a cheap bottom of the line Strat. This is pricey enough when I got it. Doesn't have the locking heads on it, so how much money are you going to spend before bullet-end strings are going to do the job for you? So a little disappointed in that. I do have another set which are specifically, they're called like Hendrix bullet-end strings. They're kind of branded with his face and name. I'll try them. I'm curious to see if they sound differently to these ones, because these don't sound all that special to me. So if you're looking at the Bullet-end like I was originally online and thinking, wow, I've never heard of these before, maybe they're going to allow me to do some crazy things with the whammy bar and it won't go out of tune. Well, I've saved you the bother, because it's not really going to be the case. Disappointing, because there are times when I've cranked the distortion on my amp and just let that distortion ride in a massive wave of noise, and then with the whammy bar you can just do these crazy things and it's a lot of fun, but then you have to tune up afterwards before you can play a song again. And I always kind of thought, well, it'd be nice to have that option of bringing that into a live gig, just going a little crazy, but having confidence that tuning is going to stay there. Not so, not with this guitar anyway. If that was the reason that you were excited to try these strings, then I can't say you're going to be that excited once you actually do try them, so save yourself the bother. But if you're really just thinking, well, maybe they sound good, then in my opinion, they're not that awesome either. So that's kind of two strikes. That's all I got for this week. As always, if I try anything new, strings, pedals, amps, guitars, you name it, I like to share my thoughts on my channel. And if you like what you see on the channel, please do go ahead and subscribe and click the bell icon so that you get a notification when I post new content. And I will see you all again in a future upcoming video.